Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 12th episode of the Coffee with Demons podcast. My guest for this episode is Dr. Dave Miers. Dr. Miers works at Bryan Medical Center here in Lincoln, Nebraska, where he is the Counseling and Program Development Manager, and also works as part of Bryan's Mental Health Services Administration. Now, I think every episode of the podcast has been super important, but Dr. Miers really brings something special to the table. He was able to shed light on the programs for mental health that he started and worked on, and we were able to go in depth on the topic of suicide in today's day and age, and I think our conversation was packed with vital information that everyone can truly benefit from hearing. His credentials, the awareness and help he's brought to mental health and suicide, as well as what he's done for the community really speaks for itself. So without further ado, episode number 12 of the Coffee with Demons podcast with guest Dr. Dave Miers. Enjoy. Awesome, and we are live with the 12th episode of the Coffee with Demons podcast. I'm super excited for this one, also super nervous. As my guest here is Dave Miers. I'm going to hand over the reins to Dave and, let him give you guys a little rundown of, what he does on the daily basis. So go ahead and take it over.
All right, thanks. My name is Dr. Dave Miers. I'm with Bryan Medical Center. I've been with the medical center for, I'm the Counseling and Program Development Manager at Bryan Medical Center. And I've been there for 23 years.
Wow.
Or almost 23 years, 22 years and 8 months.
Right.
But what my role there is, I wear a couple different hats. I manage the outpatient program at Bryan Medical Center, the mental health program. But I also work with all of the mental health programs, our inpatient, mental health emergency room. I do our marketing, our outreach. I work with our business planning, business development. So there's a lot of things that I do for mental health in my job. But one of the things that I do and as part of my outreach is that I'm very involved with suicide prevention. And with suicide prevention, I started back in my whole career has been involved with suicide prevention. I've always been very interested in mental health and suicide prevention from the beginning when I started getting into this field. And when I started at Bryan, I had the opportunity back in 1999 when the Surgeon General, David Satcher, declared a call to action to prevent suicide. He put together a little booklet with folks' input from around the country, and he declared suicide a public health problem and said that we need to do something to make a difference in the world, in the United States, for suicide prevention, and that the numbers are way too high. And with all the input that he received, this little purple booklet had a model in it called Awareness, Intervention, and Methodology, that we needed to look at those three things and apply that to all the states. But in order to do that, you needed to pull all the states together. So I was invited, the state of Nebraska was invited to go to the regional meeting in Kansas City, and the state of Nebraska representative at that time reached out to the hospital, and they knew of my interest and said, hey, could Dr. Miers go along to this meeting? And I was given the okay to go. And so we went to this meeting and met with other states from the area, and we broke up into groups, and that's where we kind of developed Nebraska's first state suicide prevention plan.
Very cool. So you were on the ground floor of kind of, building the whole program from the bottom up.
Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool.
So then we came back, and then we started the Nebraska State Suicide Prevention Coalition here in Nebraska. And we started meeting monthly at Bryan Medical Center and bringing folks from around the state looking at suicide prevention. And it was really a unfunded, it was a coalition. So it was just a group of interested folks meeting to look at suicide prevention in the state of Nebraska. And so really we were looking at things that we wanted to do, but there was no, a lot of things in the state when they say, okay, we want this to happen, we want this to happen. A lot of times there's funds attached to it. Well, there's no funds attached to suicide prevention. So we had to become creative and go out and find some grants and do some different things. So we started doing that over the years and putting things together and creating some opportunities to put things together to create some different projects. And a lot of things have happened over the last 20 years with suicide prevention in Nebraska, and we can talk more about that here a little bit later. But that's what I really I think is unique about, which I think is really neat about Bryan Medical Center, is that we are very we believe in our community, our state, and our region, and that especially with here I am working in mental health, and that with my position I'm able to dive into topics such as suicide prevention or other things. There's other things that I'm working in as well as part of my job. Suicide prevention is just one of those, but to be able to jump into that and to try to make a difference and to do that on the state level. And we've been able to take pieces of that and actually work on a national level on some different things.
Very cool. So where did it all begin for you, I guess, is where does your passion come from even like the mental health to the counseling to the suicide prevention? And is there something that hits close to home, or is it just something you've always been passionate about?
Well, I grew up with in a family that was very both of my parents were very giving to the community, in that my mom, who passed away a couple of years ago, but looking back at my mom, she was very community oriented, received a lot of awards for all of her just involvement in the various things that she did. And then my dad is the same way. And when I look back, and I was given a presentation a couple weeks ago, and when I was kind of talking about this, and that when I was getting involved, when I was thinking back about how did I get involved in suicide prevention, or what kind of sparked my direction just in that topic alone, I think it probably really started back when I was little, and my dad has received his 50-year pin here about 3 months ago for being involved in the volunteer fire service. And so growing up, we used to have a police scanner or fire scanner in our house, and that thing would just go all the time.
Right.
And so you just got used to, you're watching TV and then hearing this noise in the background, but then you would know what the tone was when it was, okay, Dad's going to be leaving here pretty soon to go on this call. But then you would, it's all confidential and everything, but you would hear certain things over the scanner, and you would know that, gosh, somebody's hurt, or, this has happened. And then you hear things in communities, and, that hasn't changed, but there's always been a stigma attached with, individuals who have taken their own life. And there's always been kind of that, we shouldn't talk about it, or let's, if we talk about it, it's going to make it worse, which is a myth. And the best thing you can do is to talk about it and to get it out in the open. And so I kind of, even back when I was little, remember when individuals would die by suicide, and in my own community. And then as I got older, I had some experiences where individuals that I knew had died by suicide, and I just knew that, hey, I want to make a difference, and I want to try to look into that. And when I was working on my doctoral program, I was able to do some research where I visited with families who had lost a child to suicide, and then I was able to write and publish some research. Then I wrote a chapter in a textbook that looked at families who lost a child to suicide and what was helpful to them at the time of death, and what was not helpful and what was helpful, and what can we do in the future to help families. That's what really sparked my interest, was just my experience growing up and seeing, my family and others helping others. Not only, they weren't helping suicide families, but they're helping others who were hurt or injured. But then in that, with my own experience of seeing others who had lost their lives and those types of things, that just made me curious and made me want to look more into that. And when I started researching that and got into school, that just really kind of stuck with me. And I met some families, and I had met somebody early on in college, somebody in the mental health field, not in the field, a family member who had some children who suffered from mental illness. And they talked to me and kind of mentored me and talked to me a little bit about that, and that was really impacted me early on in my college career about how beneficial it is to have professionals in the field that have an understanding. And a lot of those experiences, those hands-on experiences, were very important to me. And then that's really what helped kind of steer my direction with where I am today.
Very cool. So what did you get your PhD in then?
I got my PhD, and I was able to kind of tailor my program to kind of focusing really on suicide and suicide prevention. I got it at the University of Nebraska, and it's in the field of human sciences.
Okay.
And as I mentioned, my research, I really looked kind of at a couple different things. Kind of the key thing I think that I continue to look at today is the concept of connectedness, is that we really need to be more connected as a community or as a society. That there's a lot of research out there, and that's what I found in my doctoral program and some of the things that I was studying and researching. And even today, there's still a lot of research being done on that the more connected the community is, or more connected an individual is to their community, to their school, to their family, to their church, the less likely it is that they're going to abuse substances, the less likely it is that they're going to want to end their life by suicide, the less violence in general.
Right.
And the healthier they are going to be mentally. And where we're going today with technology and with cell phones and different things, is there's a lot of positives to cell phones and to social media if we use it in the right way.
Right.
But a lot of times folks are turning to that as their connection, but they're not meeting face to face with folks and having those real social connections.
Right. So was there, like, looking back at your research, did you ever, look at the Midwest or even Nebraska and Lincoln compared to other parts of the, country, and how, we kind of compared in that, connectedness, are we more connected, or did you look at that at all?
I did not see any research, anything out there that kind of compared the different.
Right.
The different.
Yeah, I was
parts.
just wondering because the Midwest seems, and like you were saying, did you grow up in Lincoln? Did you grow up around there?
I grew up around the area.
Okay.
Yeah.
So just even you explaining your upbringing and how your parents were involved in the community, and I just see a lot of that even still today in the Midwest and how, we live our lives. But and I've never lived anywhere else, so that was just kind of a question of mine. But I can definitely see the what you were saying, and a lot of my guests have even talked about belonging to a community, and then just expanding on that. So if you're down and you're down in the dumps kind of thing, that it's always nice to have a group to fall back on. I know a guest of mine was super into like the car scene, so his automotive friends, and then I've talked to multiple people that's kind of about the MMA community, so martial arts, and just having those friends as like a family, or just coming together because you enjoy one thing. So I do agree, and I think that's super cool to see, or to be backed by actual research kind of
Absolutely.
thing.
Yeah.
So another question of mine is, and you kind of talked about it a little bit. You said that the stigma behind suicide is it's like we shouldn't, or the myth behind suicide is we shouldn't talk about it, and it's actually the opposite, that we need to talk about it to help things. And even growing up, if somebody in my community were to, take their own life, it was almost like a hush-hush kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Like, no one wanted to talk about it. But then, there's no healing if it's not talked about. So do you want to, kind of give a little bit just about, why we do need to talk about it?
Absolutely, yeah. Individuals who, that I worked with over the years, and then in all the reading and just all the folks that I've talked to around the country who have talked about their own suicide attempts, and leading up to their attempts, what they have said is that what would have been helpful to them, or what they wanted, was somebody to understand their pain, somebody to approach them and say, hey, what's going on? Can you tell me how you're feeling? Can you tell me what's going on? Are you thinking about suicide? And if you are, can you tell me about that? Tell me more about that. I want to understand.
Right. So do you think it's, sorry to cut you off.
Yeah.
Do you think it's like a pro to, and I'm sure you were going to talk about this, but to say, is it good or bad to, approach the individual and say, I know what you're going through? Or do you think that almost, angers them, or thinks it takes away from their story and what they're going through kind of thing, if that makes sense? So if I was, or if I had a friend that was having suicidal thoughts, do I approach them and say, listen, I get it, or just more of the, explain to me kind of thing what you're going through?
Generally, it's best to say, explain to me. For some folks, if somebody says, well, I get it, I mean, each person's experience is different. Mm-hmm. And so to that person, it might turn them off, because they might say, well, yeah, you might get it, but your experience was different, so you don't really quite understand what I'm going through. Whereas in some situations that might be okay. So it really just depends on that relationship that that person has with you. In most cases, it's best just to be a good listener and to not offer any kind of advice or anything like that, but to say, I want to understand what you're going through. But to maybe say, some of the things that we've suggested to folks in some of the trainings is, which is true, is to say, this is a sign of strength that you're telling me this. It's not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of strength, and that I'm going to stay with you until we can get you connected with some resources.
Right.
And let's get you, here, especially here in Lincoln, if the person is suicidal and you say, well, let's talk about, do you have a plan? What have you thought about? To call 911 to get that person connected to emergency resources right away. If they're willing to go with you, to get them to the Bryan West Mental Health Emergency Room, which is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They have somebody there that can assess the situation and make sure that person's safe. If you're not sure what to do, you can always call 1-800 273-8255, which is the National Suicide Helpline. They've trained folks there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week that can help you. And even if you're not sure, if you yourself are struggling and you're listening to this, you're like, gosh, I don't know who to talk to, call that National Suicide Helpline. They will help you. If you're helping somebody else and you're not sure who to talk to or what steps to take, call that number. They will help you intervene and help the person. And even if you want to practice and you say, I want to know what it's like to call that number, it's okay to pick up. I actually recommend folks. I tell folks all the time, in your cell phone, type in 1-800-273-8255. Put that into your contacts and put National Suicide Helpline. That way you have it in your cell phone, because you never know when you might need that. And you can call that number and just say, hey, I'm just making sure that I have this number correctly and I'm connecting, and they're okay with you doing that, because they want, just make sure you have that in there, and that way it's always there, right, and you can connect.
Right. So, what do you think that the reason is that people don't, seek out or use those resources that even Bryan puts on, or like the National Suicide Hotline? What do you think stops individuals hurting from, reaching out to even a family member or the hotline?
Well, what we know is that individuals who have thoughts of suicide or have those feelings, they feel like they're a burden to other individuals. They feel isolated. They feel like they're a burden, and they feel like if I ask somebody or if I talk to somebody, one, they probably aren't going to understand what I'm going through, and two, I'm already a burden, and I'm going to be more of a burden if I talk to them.
Right.
And which is absolutely false. The best thing they could do is to talk to somebody, and then what we know is happening is that other individuals are thinking, well, gosh, if I see that person struggling, should I bring it up or should I not bring it up? And so they're hesitating to even bring it up. The best thing that they can do is to bring it up. So if I were to see you struggling, I should say, hey, I'm kind of worried about you, or I've noticed that you've been, you've been more isolative, you have been appearing more sad lately. This is what I've noticed in you. Sometimes when people do that, they have thoughts of suicide. Are you thinking of suicide? I talk about this a lot, so it's easier for me to say that, and I know it's not easy for folks to say that sometimes, and that can be hard to say.
Right, but and that was even one of my questions. So for you to say that and to help the people that need to help those close to them that might be struggling, I think that's super good to get out there, because that was one of my questions is, do I approach someone that I think might be on the verge of suicide and lay out that, hey, I think, like, are you going this direction? Or even using the term suicide is, I didn't know if that was either progressive towards it, and they think, or would push them towards it, kind of thing. So I think that's that's vital information to tell those people that it might be hard to talk about it, but it's something that needs talked about for sure.
Absolutely, yeah.
So do you want to talk a little bit about the resources that Bryan has? I know you mentioned it a little bit, just the 24-hour facilities you guys have.
Absolutely, yeah. If one thing I want to point out is that we also on our I mentioned our 24-hour mental health emergency room, and I'll talk about that here in a second. But if individuals are are listening and they're not sure, gosh, I might be depressed, or I might be anxious, or I just don't know what's going on, but I think maybe I have some type of a mental illness that I think I might need to go see somebody and get diagnosed, but I'm not sure. You could go to our website, and it's bryanhealth.org. If you just go to bryanhealth.org, there's a link on there for screenings, but if you go to bryanhealth.org and /mental-health, then you can go and click on screenings, and then on there it's mental health, depression. It just says mental health screenings, online screenings. There's all kinds of choices on there. You can take a depression screening, anxiety, post-traumatic stress, alcohol screening, psychosis screening. I mean, there's a whole bunch on there. But if you're not sure what type of screening to take, there's just a general screening that will ask you a bunch of questions kind of covering all the different diagnoses. And then at the end, it gives you, it's not a diagnosis, but it says yes or no, basically. You have enough symptoms to warrant taking the next step to see somebody to determine if there is a diagnosis there.
Right. And I think that's super cool, and I think that's something that a lot of people don't know, and a vital resource that, I guess I'll ask this: do you know if other states or places have tests like that you can go to?
It's offered other places. I mean, it's a service that you can. It's a national service, but you have to go on and decide to offer it. So I think we're one of the only places around that offers it here that I'm aware of in our region.
Right.
And so that is something that it's free, it's confidential. So if I go on, I don't have to enter my name or anything like that. The only thing that I get at the end of the month is a report that says how many people went on and took the screening. So there's no way that we can track individuals. You can the nice thing about it is you can print it off and then take it with you to the doctor if you do decide to go see somebody. And then there's information on there there's a lot of educational resources that you can print off about the different mental illnesses. As far as actual programs, the mental health emergency room is a place for folks that can come that if you're wanting to determine if you need to be hospitalized for mental health reasons. And it's generally, if a person is a danger to self or others. And so it's generally if you're suicidal, or having mental health symptoms and you're, just not feeling safe at home. And we treat all ages. So it's generally ages 5 through seniors, 100 plus that we work with. And we see between 500 to 700 individuals a month that come through our mental health emergency room that are in a crisis. So it's a busy program. It's actually one of the only mental health emergency rooms of its kind in the United States. And Bryan was one of the first hospitals in the United States to start providing mental health services in an acute care hospital, and that was in 1939. So we have a rich history of kind of providing that foundation of mental health services here in our community. And then so once you're in the emergency room, you walk in the main emergency room. So just like if you had a broken leg and I am suicidal, we both walk into the same emergency room. We both see the same triage nurse, and they're taking my vital signs and your vital signs. For your broken leg, they would escort you back to a treatment room to x-ray and do that. But once I'm determined that I'm physically stable, but I'm there for my, for suicide, depression, whatever it might be, they would escort me back to the mental health section of the emergency room.
Oh, okay.
And then we have 4 interview rooms back there, and I would be placed in one of those rooms, and then I would see either a nurse or a social worker who would do an assessment, and then they would visit, and the emergency room physician would come in and see me,
right,
and then they would reach out to the on-call psychiatrist, and then that psychiatrist makes a determination whether or not I meet admission criteria for the hospital, and then they determine from there what the next steps are. We also have some observation rooms in the emergency room, so if it's determined that I don't meet criteria to be admitted, but they really want to observe me for a little bit longer before I go home, they can place me in an observation room so I can be held for up to 24 hours in the emergency room. But if I am admitted, then we have a secure private elevator in the emergency room that goes to the second floor, which is right above the emergency room, and that's where all of our mental health units are located. We have a youth program that serves children and adolescents. We have an affective disorders unit, which is for adults. It's a 10-bed unit. We have an adult unit, which serves all kinds of affective disorders units, depression, any type of mood disorder.
Right.
Then the adult unit is for really any type of mental health diagnoses. That's a 19-bed unit. And then we have our senior mental health unit, which is for ages 55 and older.
Very cool.
And so average length of stay is about 3 to 5 days generally. On the senior unit, it's a little bit longer than that. But we have a teacher on staff for the youth program. So the youth, when they come in, they're in programming all day long. They're going to school. They're doing a lot of different things.
Right. Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
So sorry to cut you off right there. We're going to take a break for the cameras, and then we will be right back.
All right. Thanks.
What's up, everybody? We are still selling our OG Coffee with Demons shirts for $25 a pop. So make sure to get at me or Jacob to snag yours while the supplies last. The shirts are a super soft 60/40 material that comes in an athletic, slim fit made by Next Level. They're super nice and comfortable, and the Coffee with Demons logo is the cherry on top. So hit me up to get yours. Awesome, and we're back, and I will, keep my part short just because I think, Dr. Dave Miers has a lot of brilliant stuff to say, even from the first segment. So I do want to thank you for everything you laid out, in that first 30 minutes. I think a lot of people don't normally seek out that type of information just because it's easier to kind of stay shelled up, but it's information that I think is, vital to help you or even those around you. So I'm going to hand the reins back over, and if you talk a little bit about, what you guys do for your, outpatient if you don't want to come into the hospital.
Yeah, so I was talking a little bit about the inpatient. So when somebody leaves inpatient, they can be transitioned to what we call our outpatient partial care program, or somebody could go right into partial care and not go to inpatient, but there has to be a psychiatrist has to order that program as well. And that's where you spend the day with us, but you go home in the evening.
Okay.
And you're in programming all day. But then we do have our outpatient program called the Counseling Center. And that's where we have psychologists on staff, and then we have licensed independent clinical social workers on staff. So if I'm not in an immediate crisis, but I could benefit from outpatient counseling and want to see a therapist for counseling, I could call in to the counseling center at Bryan Medical Center at West and schedule an appointment and come in and see a therapist for outpatient counseling. So we do have a continuum of services through our mental health program.
Definitely, and I think that's super cool. And even when people think about mental health help, they think about therapy, counseling, and that's basically kind of all they think about. So just getting these out there, I think is great for people to know that there are steps you can take before you have to see a therapist and go to counseling, and there are steps after or in between, and all the above type things. So
absolutely.
I'll let you keep going.
Yep, and so there's when we also have peer specialists on staff. They are mental health peer specialists. They're individuals with lived mental health experience, and they work on the mental health units. But then we've also started our program at the hospital, working on the medical units with individuals with chronic pain. And so when there's somebody who comes in with chronic pain and the acute pain service comes in and they're working with somebody who is trying to manage their pain with some non-pharmacological approaches, they oftentimes consult our peer specialists, and they'll come in to the medical unit and they'll work with that individual to try some different things to try to manage pain without the use of medication. Right. So trying some different, relaxation things and just some different alternative approaches. But then one of the things that we offer when folks leave, both inpatient mental health and if they leave the pain program or leave the medical program or the inpatient medical unit, but this is also open to anybody in the community, is our Wellness Recovery Action Plan groups. We call them WRAP groups. And so this is open to not anybody, it's anybody with a mental illness, but also we've had folks that have come in who have a medical illness as well, and they just want to, become more well, become healthier. And so a wellness plan is where you can come in once a week, and they meet with the peer specialist in a group setting, and they have a little booklet that they go through, and each booklet has a section that they go through each week, and it develop, what are my symptoms? How do I know when I'm doing well? What are the signs when I'm not doing well? Who can I call? Who's my support system? What's my crisis plan? There's different sections that they go through in the RAP plan. And so we have one just general group that meets on Thursdays, but then we also have one just specific chronic pain that meets on Tuesdays. Oh. So that's a really beneficial group, and that's where you, kind of going back to that connectedness, that is where you have somebody who kind of understands a lot of times what individuals are going through, because it's somebody with lived experience who can say, I don't know exactly what you're going through, but here's my, they say, here's my plan.
Right.
And so they show what their plan looks like and help others develop their own plan.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So it brings a question to my mind about, when does a person seek out the help that, like you guys offer and Bryan offers? Is there, because I know that, life's not black and white. It's all gray, and there aren't really any clear-cut lines. So would you say, or would you give the advice of, error on the side of caution kind of thing? If you are feeling down, it's not a bad thing because that's my mindset, err on the side of caution. It's never bad to, everybody gets sad. So, it's fine to seek that help even if you don't think that you're going to need it for the rest of your life kind of thing. So if you want to kind of attest to that a little bit or just give your 2 cents on that.
Absolutely. I would err on the side of caution. It's always good to get that support. If you're just not sure, I would reach out and get support. Mm-hmm. Even if you're just going a couple times and you feel like, oh, you know what, I think I'm doing okay. That therapist will help you, set those goals, and if you feel like you've met your goals, then you don't need to go back. The thing with therapy is building that relationship with that person, and so you have to find somebody that you feel connected to. And again, early intervention is important. And what we know, I'm just going to talk about depression specifically, is that we know that, and this is, I think, kind of an alarming fact, is that out of the millions of folks in society with depression, only about a third of those are actually seeking the treatment that's available to help them. Wow. Which means that two-thirds of those with depression are walking around suffering, and depression is one of the most treatable mental illnesses that there are.
Right. So do you think out of those 2/3, do you think some of them could be walking around not, putting a name to it as depression, or not even thinking, I might be depressed? Because that's kind of where, just from my own story and upbringing, looking on paper, I should have never been sad. I should have never been depressed. I had everything going for me. My life was, everything was fine. It was all fine and dandy, but on the inside I didn't feel the best kind of thing, and I just was like shoving it off to the side. I was like, you're okay, just you'll get through it, kind of not. So that's what, I guess that was my question, is what would you say to those people who, or how would you try and get those people to realize that, it might be something more than just not feeling okay?
Yeah, absolutely. And that individuals oftentimes do kind of think that they put it off to the side, or they think, I think I'm going to be okay. That it is something that can be very serious. Mm-hmm. And so we do need to take action, and we do need to take steps too. And that's why I think the online tool is very vital, is that's a great way for somebody to, because you can go into a room and sit down on a computer and pull up that screening tool and take those questions and find out right away to say, gosh, you know what, some of the signs and symptoms are there. And that's a great way to detect that, you know, I think this is me.
Right.
And these symptoms are me. And that I need to take some steps to get better.
Definitely. And I think part of the whole, part of the whole thing is breaking down the stigma of mental health, just because people don't want to admit they're hurting or going through something, or they don't want to, have that title of depressed or, things like the sort. So I think, what you're doing is fantastic and trying to raise awareness. And that's kind of, the whole goal of Coffee with Demons is just to break down that stigma of mental health, and it's okay not to be okay, kind of thing.
Absolutely.
So moving forward, do you is it hard for you ever to keep doing what you're doing? Does it weigh on you? Is there Jacob, our cameraman, part of the Coffee with Demon team, he asked that question, just does it, because my dad's he's a psychologist and counselor, and he doesn't ever come home and, it looks like it weighs on him a ton, but there are times when I can see that, maybe the life's kind of sucked out of him. So is it hard for you to keep doing what you're doing?
I really enjoy what I do, and it's what it really motivates me. But part of that is it's really important for individuals in any helping profession is to practice self-care. And so we have to practice what we preach, and that's what we help individuals with as well, is that when we are helping individuals, oftentimes is we're showing this is what you need to practice self-care, and we're teaching self-care principles, but then we as helping professionals have to do that as well.
Right.
And we have to learn to set boundaries and learn to say no, and learn to, take the time for ourselves and do things that are enjoyable for us, so that we can be healthy as helping professionals. Because if we're not healthy and we're not healthy and energetic, then we're not going to be a healthy, energetic person to be helping that person who we're trying to help.
Definitely. And I even, I'm not a professional by any means, but just from starting Coffee with Demons and trying to get the word out, so how I kind of started this was I wrote blogs down, and, I just posted a new blog, and I was reading through my old posts, and it was just, it was like I was talking to myself kind of thing, because all these things that I had written down and preached to people, and, I was trying to get across to people, I was forgetting myself kind of thing. So it was kind of like a slap in the face. It's like there's definitely, if I'm not 100%, then how can I give someone else, my 100%?
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
I think that's super cool that you guys are aware of that, and also, implementing that whole self-care thing. I think that's super cool.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I put together a little, actually a self-care tip sheet that I use with I use it with staff. I use it with when I go do speaking engagements and do different things that kind of talks about the mind, body, and spirit. That here's some self-care tips for the mind. Here's some self-care tips for the the body, and for the spirit. That just some simple things like we all get like at the medical center where we do a lot of thank you notes, so acknowledgement that somebody does something for us, we'll send a thank you note to that other person, that other department, or we'll reach out to them and compliment them. And so there's a lot of ways to support each other.
Definitely.
But we do that, and we get thank you notes in the mail from other folks. If I go out and I do something at another agency or something, I might get a thank you note. So one of those tips that you create a self-compliments file, basically.
Okay.
So you buy this, one of those memo books with
Right.
all the lines in it, and then you put a sticker on the front of it. You'd say, "Hey, Dr. Miers self-compliments book." And then when you get one of those notes, you put tape on the back of it and you just stick it on one of the pages. And then if you get an email, you cut out the email and you tape it on there. If somebody calls you and says something positive, you stop what you're doing and you write it in the book. Then you just keep it in your drawer. And if you're having a tough day and you're feeling kind of drained, you pull out that self-compliments book and you just sit there for a few minutes and you read through that year's worth of notes, and that picks you up.
Definitely.
Yeah.
It's because it's always easier to recall, the negative things, and we seem to, as humans, a positive thing could happen, and it's like we, take in the positive energy for a second, and then put it in the trash kind of things. But the negative things stick with us, so I think that's an awesome way to keep the, positive energy going, and look back on those things and realize that the happiness can continue, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So that's super cool.
Yeah. So that's just one of the little things on that tip sheet. So,
very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. So do you want to talk about? So I guess I'm interested in what some of the other things are, like, say for for the self-care for the spirit. Do you want to talk about just something that might be on that list?
Well, I think it's important to, when you're like the deep breathing, there's some different things in there about taking the deep breaths and then thinking about the positive thoughts, and then the relaxation, but then kind of the tips on how to breathe, but then thinking about like your favorite place.
Right.
There's in terms of your, like, trying to think about another one. I like taking a different route to work.
Okay.
If you're used to going to work a certain way, just taking a different route.
Right.
And that alerts your senses to different things. Definitely. And you're seeing different things.
Right. I mean, we just get stuck in our ways so much that it seems like, one might think that their life is so, either boring or not going to change, but really we'd have the power to, change it with just something as simple as that, taking a different route to work, and that you could see something that would brighten your day. I think that's super cool. And a lot of people, well, in my opinion anyways, I think a lot of people think happiness is supposed to come without them doing anything or without them trying at all. But, from what you were saying about the tips, like, there are things you can do. You have to, put energy into it to get to find that happiness as well, because it's not just gonna come from doing nothing.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. So, what advice do you have to listeners to what they can do to try and also, promote the suicide awareness and, help others that they don't know need help, or just in general kind of thing?
Yeah. We were talking about the, on break, we were talking about the 1-800-273-8255, how that was incorporated into a rap song, into music, and how that's kind of out into national media, or onto the national scene.
Right.
And suicide was kind of put onto the national scene kind of in a negative light with the 13 Reasons Why. And the reason I say negative is there was a lot of negative media about it, and about some of the different things, that how it was portrayed, and then they went in and they changed some of the scenes, but in a way it brought it to light, and then we were able to use that to then reach out to the media and use it to bring positive messages, to folks about it. But how folks can use some different things is that what we've done here in our local community is that there is a website that we put together. We've started a local coalition here called the Lincoln Lancaster Suicide Prevention Coalition, and that's really anybody who's interested in getting involved in suicide prevention can get involved in that.
Very cool.
And we have a website. It's called HopeLink, HOPELNK.org, and it's basically is meant for hope. We're wanting to bring hope to Lincoln, Hope Lincoln, but Hope LNK is LNK is kind of the tagline for the airport, and so hopelink.org. And if you've been down to the Haymarket and to the old Crawdaddy's building down there, we have a mural up on there that says "Speak up, bring hope." And kind of going back to our conversation before is that it's okay to talk about suicide. That we want to start the conversation. And so what we did with this whole Hope Link thing is that we put together these what we call conversation kits. And so the whole idea behind it was inside this conversation kit we put these little coupon for a copy card, and that's how we started this whole thing. Cool. So then I would come to you and say, hey, let's go for coffee, and we'd sit down and I'd tell you about Hope Link. And inside it was a T-shirt and some different things, but then I would give a Hope kit to you, a conversation kit, and then you would take it to somebody else, and then you just keep passing it on. Yeah,
very cool.
So we put the mural up down in the Haymarket, and now a lot of the youth are when they're getting their senior pictures, they're getting their pictures taken by it, and
very cool.
Doing some different things. But when you go to that website, there's different things on there that if you're wanting to find out what resources are here in Lincoln for suicide prevention, but if you're wanting to get involved, that's another way to go. You can go to that website and say, hey, I want to get involved. Then it takes you to a link to get more information, to get on the list for the meetings and those types of things.
Very cool.
For here within our community, because we've done a lot of things within the community through the Hope Link and through that coalition. The coalition here locally, I mentioned the state coalition. The local coalition we started in 2014.
Okay.
Dr. Steve Joel from Lincoln Public Schools, unfortunately we had a high number of suicides that year, and he reached out and said we need to do something here in Lincoln, and pulled a bunch of us together, and we started the local coalition. And since then, we've done a lot of really neat things here in Lincoln that I think folks, if they want to get involved, there's a lot of opportunities. We put together some signage. Actually, the signage we put together at Bryan Medical Center back in 2013 and put them up in our parking garage. And the signage...
there's some in the Haymarket as well?
Yes.
Yes, I've seen those. Yep. Very cool.
So we put these up in Bryan East and West, and then, so it says, feeling hopeless, depressed, suicidal, you're not alone. Well, then when the local coalition started in 2014, we started setting up some goals, and we decided that, we wanted to do something in the parking garages. And we said, well, hey, I said, hey, we've already developed a sign at Bryan Medical Center, and so I talked to the medical center, and we said, we'll just reformat the sign a little bit, and we'll work with the local coalition. And so the local coalition reached out to, at that time it was Mayor Beitler, and he gave us the okay to put it up in the Q Street garage. And so the medical center worked with, at that time we had a federal grant through the state, and for the state suicide prevention coalition. So the funds helped us print some signage, and so we put that up in the Q Street garage, and it went really well, and it was kind of a pilot for like 6 months. And then Mayor Beitler gave us the okay to put it up in all of the city garages.
Oh, very cool.
And then we worked with UNL and got them up at UNL garages. And so now they're pretty much up quite a few places here in Lincoln. And we know that they've really helped a lot of individuals.
Yes, definitely.
So far. So that's one project that we did with the local coalition. We worked with Lincoln Public Schools and worked with implementing a screening tool that now they're using in all elementary, middle, and high schools. When there's a student who they feel is at risk, they can make a referral, and that student is being screened and then connected with resources. We're working with Lincoln Police Department, and every year since the coalition started, we've had what's called a Gun Amnesty Day, and we have volunteers that go and sit with the police department on, let's say, like a Saturday morning, and we advertise it. And anybody who has a firearm that they don't want to have anymore, they can show up, no questions asked, and drop off the firearm and ammunition. And then generally we'll have some lock boxes or gun locks that they can pick up at no cost if they have other firearms.
Very cool. Very cool. So my first thing is if you have an extra one of those, I'd love to throw it up on the wall sometime.
Yeah, you can have that.
Awesome. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. And my next question, just because you were talking about the youths and the elementary school, so how do you think how important do you think that is putting not in a negative way, putting suicide in the mind of the young kids, but making them aware? Because when I was growing up, I honestly, and it might be because of my bad memory, but I don't think that there was much. If we did talk about suicide, it was at on the surface, and we never dove into the reasons that it could be behind it. So how important do you think that is for us to start the awareness at a young age for kids?
It's really important, and I talked about the screening, but here in Lincoln, they do this thing. It's called the SOS. It's the SOS Program, and they do that. I believe at the 8th grade, and then I think it's 8th and 11th grade. Don't know that for sure, but they do expose the youth at 2 different times through their career in the school system, where they learn about suicide, the signs and symptoms, and how to help. Now we're implementing, they're implementing what they call Hope Squads in some of the different high schools, where it's peers helping. So if I feel suicidal, I know who the peer helpers are within the school, and I can go to them, and then they will assist me, and then they'll go to the teacher or the person at the school to make sure I'm getting connected. So it's very, very important. And one of the things that has been very impactful here in Lincoln is a program that actually a student started here a couple years ago through the local coalition, and it's called I don't know if maybe you've heard of it. It's called Hear the Hope.
I actually have, yes.
Okay. And so, the first couple years were down, or the first year was down in the pavilion downtown, and then we had it downtown in the theater this last year. But then the funds go to support suicide prevention and support the local coalition. Very cool. And then the funds went to help purchase some lock boxes and some different things.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. So I know on the phone. Oh, well, okay. So my next question will come during the next segment. So Thank you very much. I hope you're enjoying Season 2 of the Coffee with Demons podcast. We are always looking for sponsors who believe in our movement and would like to help us create a brighter tomorrow. If you are interested in sponsoring an episode or know someone who might be, shoot me an email at contact@coffeewithdemons.com. Once again, that's contact@coffeewithdemons.com. Thank you. Awesome. So what I was going to say, I know when we talked on the phone, you had mentioned that, postvention is almost just as important as prevention. And I think, or I'd like you to talk about that a little bit, just because I think that's a lot of people, that's a thing that slips a lot of people's minds, or they have different ideas of it. So
Yeah, absolutely. So postvention, if folks aren't familiar with that, that is, what happens after somebody dies by suicide. And so that's providing support to the family and friends or those who knew that individual who died by suicide. And we know that families are those families most closely connected to that individual are at a higher risk for suicide. And so it's important that we wrap services around them. And by doing that, then that reduces suicide. So that's postvention. And one thing that we have started here we started here in Lincoln, and now we've taken it statewide, and that's the program that we're kind of working on nationally, is the LOSS team, and it stands for Local Outreach to Suicide Survivors. And that is a postvention program. So back in 2007, I was at a national conference with a colleague, and we heard a presentation by Dr. Frank Campbell from Louisiana. And Dr. Campbell talked about the Local Outreach to Suicide Survivors program that he started there. And he had this vision to where he thought if you had two suicide survivors, and in this instance, suicide survivor means somebody who has lost somebody to suicide. So two survivors and then a mental health clinician, so a team of 3 available. So when there's a death by suicide, the police or coroner can reach out and say, okay, we've had a death by suicide, can you come and provide support to the family? And he said that if you have that support there as soon as possible, sometimes even as quickly, as within an hour, sometimes even when that individual's still there and the police and fire and paramedics are still on the scene, that's going to reduce, that's going to help that family.
Definitely.
And so what he did is he did some research, and what it showed is that families who don't have contact with a lost survivor wait sometimes upwards to 4.5 to 5 years before they reach out for support.
Wow.
And families who have that postvention support from a survivor, they drops down to 39 days before they're reaching out for support. So it took him about 10 years before the coroner in Louisiana decided that, okay, we're going to let this happen.
Right.
Because he wanted them to go right to the crime scene. And the crime, suicide is a crime scene, and they don't let civilians on the crime scene. And so this is the first time in the country where they let civilians onto a crime scene. So they started the program. And so we heard him present this, and I said, we got to bring this back to Nebraska. So we brought it back to the state coalition and wrote a grant to the Community Health Endowment here in Lincoln, and got the funds to bring Dr. Campbell to Lincoln to do a speaking engagement at Bryan Medical Center. And I put an ad in the paper and said, if you've lost somebody to suicide and if you're interested in being a part of this team, come to this meeting and learn about this. And I was just overwhelmed by the number of folks that we had show up to this program. And it was sad to see the number of families impacted by suicide, but it was great to see the number of families that said, hey, I want to help others,
right,
who have to go through this pain, but I want to help them, not feel alone. And so out of that large group of folks, we set up another time. We broke it down, and we had probably about 25 folks that ended up saying, okay, we want to be a part of this program. It took us about 2 years. We worked with the fire and rescue, the police department, the county attorney's office. And long story short, we ended up working with the police department and got what's called a memorandum of understanding. And we just passed our 10th year mark with the LOSS team. We started in July of 2009, and So what happens here in Lincoln is when there's a death by suicide, the police chaplain calls it's all volunteers, and the police chaplain calls our volunteer coordinator, says, hey, we've had a death by suicide. Our coordinator calls two of our lost survivors and our clinician. One of our clinicians, they go meet with the family, and we have a bag of resources that we give them. And what's neat about it is that they can walk in and they can say, they don't say, I know what you're going through, but they walk through and say, hey, I've lost this person in my life.
Right.
And what that sends a message to that other individual is that, hey, they have an idea what I'm going through. And, I've been on some of those calls, and you can just really see, the anxiety drop in those individuals. And it's not sometimes we make that first call, but then we do a follow-up call, and then we continue to make contact with that family to provide as much support as needed. It's not counseling, but it's support.
Definitely just being there is a huge part of it. And just going back to that connectedness thing, it's someone showing up who's been through that, not that they know exactly what that person's going through at the moment, but it's something they've dealt with. So it's I think that's awesome. And in my head, suicide, as rare as it is, so if something does happen to another person that you're close to, there's not a lot of people that you can search to or might know personally that have dealt with that. So I think the Lost Team, I think that's a great. I think that's great for a resource.
Thanks.
Just to be that's awesome to have that again, that connectedness, and just being on site as well as soon as it happens, because my last guest on the episode lost his brother to suicide, and he just talked about how he didn't know what to do, his family didn't know what to do, because it's something that they had never dealt with, nor been close to at all, or have people around them deal with it. So I think it's something that they could have benefited from. And he talked about how he one of the reasons he felt so bad was because suicide can cripple the survivors' lives, and life doesn't stop. So they their job doesn't stop, their career doesn't stop, what they have to do on a daily basis doesn't come to a halt. And that just adds, more overwhelming pressure to that person, to, who's dealing with the loss of someone so close to them that, so I think, I think that attests to how important that, that a resource truly can be. So I really think that's awesome.
Yep, and thank you. And we've replicated that, with the federal grant that I was mentioning before. One of the goals was to help us replicate that. So we replicated that across Nebraska. So we have 9 teams across Nebraska. So we have a team in Omaha and Seward and Beatrice and Norfolk and Kearney and out in western Nebraska. And the benefit of that is, if there's a death, let's say here in Lincoln, and there's family that lives out in other parts of Nebraska, we can call out and connect Lost Team.
Very cool.
To them. And then we have teams across the country that, and we started 10 years ago when we started the team here. We started what we called the National Lost Team Conference here in Lincoln at Bryan Medical Center, and we had it for 2 years, and then we had folks from across the country come. And then we started moving it to different states every 2 years. So we moved it to Ohio, then we moved it to Texas, and then Arizona, California. I can't remember where we've all been. But to help each state learn about how to develop lost teams.
Right.
And then so it's starting to grow across the country. And that's another benefit, so that if there's a death in another state, but the family's here, then we can connect people not only within Nebraska but nationwide. So
very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. I think that's awesome. So, I don't really have any more questions. I think you've laid everything out super great. So I do want to give you the chance to, if you do have anything else to say, please do so, because I think everything, that you've said has been wonderful, helpful, and will, impact a lot of lives. And hopefully, we can shoot this podcast out to as many people as, that can hear it. So.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate you having me on. And folks want to get involved in any of these things, I think it's important to, if anybody wants to, is interested in like the lost team and they're listening, and we do have, a website out there, Lost Team Nebraska. I would just suggest Googling it, Lost Team Nebraska. They can go on and look, into that and connect with the different lost teams. There's a process for interviewing and, getting involved in that. But just getting involved in the local level is really important. Like we talked about, with Hope Link here in Lincoln, but if folks are listening from other places, getting involved on a local level is really important. And when we talk about connectedness, getting involved is what will make a difference. Definitely. And to make a difference with suicide prevention, it is going to take a community effort, and it takes everybody to get involved. It's not just the professionals. It's not just the school. It's not just one specific segment. It's going to take all of us working together. So
I agree.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for coming on. This has been, I've enjoyed talking to you. It's been great for me just to, have a conversation and continually learn. And, like you said, it's not just the people that might experience suicide or mental health firsthand that can, play a role. It's anybody who, is willing to put themselves out there and whatnot. So for this video, I will be, putting all the phone numbers, the hotline, all of the websites that we talked about in the description, so anybody listening can, find those super quick, check them out. And yeah, so if you don't have anything more to say, well, thank you very much. This has been awesome.
Right.
Dr. Dave Miers, everybody, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Don't forget to check out the Coffee with Demons website to stay up to date with all things Coffee with Demons, from meeting dates and times to new blogs and podcasts. You can find it all at www.coffeewithdemons.com.